Feel like we're ready?
Ready?
Let me say good evening to everyone. I'm Marvin Frank Thomas, presiding bishop of the First Episcopal District of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, chair of the Department of Lay Ministries. Um, this is another in our series of Good Trouble Sunday webinars. Um, my other co-hosts, my cohorts in this work, Bishop Charlie Haynes and Brother James Blackman, we acknowledged both of them. Over the course of these past several Sundays, as we are leading up to this 2024 election, we have been having these Good Troubles seminars on each Sunday evening with various focuses. And one of the things that I've enjoyed about our time each Sunday evening is that we've invited persons from across our church to be able to come and to join us and to lead us in various conversations as we with one ultimate goal, with the one ultimate goal and purpose in mind, and that is that all of us to get out the vote. So we are encouraging you to vote. And so I'm going to turn this over now to our host for tonight, Dr. Shannon Falk, our General Secretary of Lay Ministries, and he will present our panelists and the topic of our conversation, and he will lead us in our time tonight. Welcome, Dr. Falk.
Thank you, Bishop Thomas, for this opportunity, and good to see everybody on this Sunday afternoon. Hope everyone has had a good Sunday and a blessed weekend. And we are excited to be hosting this particular series, which is so important, not just in the life and breath of the church and what we do, but just as a community as a whole. And so with this, we have a few different guests that I'm so certainly pleased that they were able to join us to be part of this conversation, this important conversation of this series that we're having as we lead up to, which I'm sure many have heard, one of the most important elections that we have had in the past several generations. But even beyond this election, we just want to have a conversation about political engagement, about politics, about the African American church, and just some other things I think that would be important for those who are listening, our laity of the church could and should hear. I'm honored today to have as a co-host my significant other, my best half, my better half, however you want to put it, the Honorable Dion Falk, who serves as Councilwoman District 4 in Inglewood, California. Also, we have a young adult, Karima Womack, who serves as the 6th Episcopal District young adult representative, and certainly glad to have him on the call and getting a perspective of a young adult. Also have on this particular series as well as we have Reverend Stephen Wayne W. Hoyt and his better half, attorney Daphne Hoyt. And Steve is not only a pastor, but also a former elected official who served as city council member for over 15 years in the Birmingham area. And then I wanted to also have Daphne on, his wife as well, who serves in multiple roles, but as an attorney, practicing attorney, but also as a pastor's wife. And I think we'll get into more conversation about that because it's a unique role serving both as a pastor's wife, but also serving as a spouse of an elected official. And sometimes people don't look at those things closely of what is really needed as far as support. So we're so glad to have her on the call. And just to say a little more about her household, I was trying to get her, and I will later on, they also have a number of attorneys in that household. They have a daughter, Maya, who also is a successful practicing attorney. So Steve gets a lot of advice, I'm sure, from that household. So we will jump right into this, and I'll kind of lead off. Again, this is just a roundtable, and we're just kind of getting together as brothers, sisters in Christ, and as friends. But leading up to this, there were a number of videos that were shown, and we kind of started off with Ray Charles with America the Beautiful, Aretha Franklin, Respect. We also had James Brown. We had Gil Scott-Heron, who is famous for the revolution that would not be televised. We had coming up to more recent with Fight the Power by Public Enemy. And then we had This Is America. So these different genres of music, of civic protest, information has been there. So this is nothing new. This is going back several generations, but it was just kind of looking at how each kind of approached that. And I'll just start off with this question to all of you. Anybody can answer it. Um, do you think that this music that we have heard, not just then, but now in the videos that have been shown, particularly now because videos of that's that, do you think it's translating into civic engagement? Do we think that are we just hearing it from just a music standpoint, a genre standpoint, a video standpoint, but is it really translating into people getting civically engaged and involved? So I'll just open it up to anybody who may want to answer that.
Well, Shannon, from my perspective, and let me say good evening to all, and certainly to our Bishop, Bishop Thomas, we certainly thank you for being and having the role that you have with the lay, and so I'm just delighted to be here. Shannon, I think that the music is just music. I think when you talk about Aretha, you talk about James Brown, you talk about Gil Scott-Heron and all these others, Ray Charles, they had a message in their music. When you talk about Marvin Gaye, what's going on, and talking about, these very prevalent social issues that we know in this country. And I don't know if we're hearing that kind of that voice now, and I don't know if in fact they're impacting, our community in the way that those musicians of old did so. You still got Stevie Wonder around, still trying to spread the love of unity and transformation. But I don't get a sense that that's what we're hearing now. I don't. There's a whole different culture. We see, and it may have gone on in those days, but he did it, and all these other folk. You got to wonder what message were you sending, what kind of message you're sending, and the construct of wholesome, involvement. I don't see that.
And I'll jump in. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Falk. I tend to agree with Steve to a certain degree. I feel like the music of yesterday, which I love, the messages were more straightforward. And now I feel like the music of today is a lot more indirect. And I still like the message. There is a message that is still in music today. And it is resonating with our younger generation, our millennials. But I think that for some of us folks that are a little bit older than that, I feel like we're missing the message that is in the music today. And I do believe the message that the music still plays a big, tremendous impact in everybody's everyday lives. And I feel like that even when you can tell by the entertainers that are performing the music today, they're coming out, they're endorsing elected officials, they're getting involved in politics, and people are listening, and it's impactful in today's politics. So I do feel like even today it's different, but I do feel that it does play a significant role in today's politics. Really do.
Well, I know that I'm not a big Taylor Swift fan. I mean, I can listen to her music, but I know that, she has, I don't know what, 400 million followers, just like Beyonce. And so whenever they endorse something or make a statement, a lot of people follow that. And so that visibility, that exposure is certainly there. And you may not necessarily agree with everything they say or do or the music, but we just have to be honest. There is a great influence that's there. And so I think entertainers, however you may want to look at athletes, public athletes, those who are in the public arena, carry a lot of weight, and maybe sometimes more than they should. But again, it's really there. And so I think that the visual piece of it is one piece that maybe was not there a generation ago, but I think the music part of there, you kind of have to maybe like Dion was saying, pull the covers back more to kind of really see what that message is. Or maybe it's just the fact that it's a language barrier, how we interpret that, how we look at that as compared. So, Caribbean, I know you're a young adult. I don't know, maybe we're completely off point of this, but do you have an opinion about music, and do you think the message is just as relevant now as it was maybe when Marvin Gaye was singing it a generation or two ago?
I appreciate you for having me on. It's just an honor to be on and share my perspective as a young adult. And I think that the message is still there. I don't think it's as prevalent or as popular amongst my demographic, I would say, as it was back then, because those songs were top songs. When you think of songs that may nowadays have that message in it, it may not be one of the hot songs that we would turn on, but it is still being heard. And I think that they do a good job. I think influence plays a big part. Who's influential in our different genres of music, whether it be, the any genre, those that influence can help, educate people, because the lack of knowledge in these different topics, can sometimes misconstrue their viewpoint on things. So I do think that the message is still there, but it just may not be as prevalent.
Okay, good.
Well, and I think, I'm not making light of the endorsement, but we were talking about messaging. And I don't know if the message is there in the music. It may be the clarity of the artist itself, of themselves, but I don't hear the message. I didn't used to like T.I., but T.I. is a brilliant young man who has a message in his music. And I have always been one to like hip hop. But when you get through all the other stuff, you hear that he has something of substance in his music. And what I'm saying, we're lacking that part. We get messaging, and messaging, endorsement, and popularity are three different things in my perspective. And so, but I do believe that when you have a Taylor Swift, when you have a Beyonce or any of those persons, they do have influence. And perhaps young people may go to the polls, but they may not know why they're going to the polls. You understand? Because there ought to be a message. It's something. Do you do it just this time, or do you do it every time? And that's what we got. That's how we win. Is when we when it becomes the essence of who we are, and understand the value of the vote and what that means for not only ourselves but for our community.
Okay.
And that's the perspective that I have of that.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Go
Jump
ahead,
in.
Daphne.
Okay, and I'd like to jump in here too. I agree. I think it's more about the influence that you artists have on our younger generation, more so than it's actually the lyrics of the message. But I think when you have someone, and we're talking about Taylor Swift, who comes out and endorse, and then that gets the attention of her followers, and she has many. But I don't necessarily think that it's necessarily what she's saying, or that the message is actually in the lyrics as much as it is the influence.
Okay. Let me kind of jump to this area. For generations, the predominantly African American congregations have had significant influence on politics and social activism of Black churches. We know that it's evidence, it's there. And also they were important as far as cultural change, to bring about cultural change. Everything from the civil rights laws and so forth. Do you believe that the Black church still has the same impact today as it did 30 years ago, 60 years ago? So do you think it's there, or do you think that there's other influences that are maybe more impactful, or do you think that we've lost that relevance? I'm just, we're seeing there's action, but I don't know if it's the lack of visibility just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not influential. But I think that when it comes to a lot of times action, organization, and things like that, it may not be there as it once was. So do you think that the church, Black church, has lost that center of influence?
I'd love to start off this conversation if you don't mind. I do believe that Black churches were much more influential in the election as well as politics. I don't know if I see that anymore. I'd love to hear from Steve on that. But for me, I don't really see it as much anymore. I know that previously, when political officials would go to churches and seek support from church members that are running for office, they were allowed to speak. They could come and have a full opportunity to share who they are, share their vision for the city. And the pastor would allow them an opportunity to really kind of connect with church members. And so now, when you have what's called church runs, that's by political officials, where right before an election, a lot of electeds go out and they hit a bunch of churches and try and be impactful for their race. They're not allowed to speak anymore. They're acknowledged. I don't even, sometimes their name is not even said. And so I know that that makes a big difference, because what you're doing in a church setting is you're minimizing the effect of politicians in that church. And I just think that that's going in the wrong direction, because when there is an issue in the city, in government, that's the first person you turn to, is your politician. And if you don't have an opportunity to choose who you want and make sure that that person is the right person in that seat, then when you need them, you might have the wrong person in that seat. And that's because you were not given that opportunity. So I'd love to hear from Steve on that. That's what I see.
You're dead on it. And I would say that it was my experience when I was running. I got more opportunity to speak at Baptist churches than I did at CME churches.
Interesting.
Do you hear me?
Okay,
Yeah.
we hear you.
And like you say, they would acknowledge you, maybe. And it was disheartening, because I know that I went to 6th Avenue, or I went to Sardis, one of the biggest churches around here, and I get up and I get a chance to speak and to share my vision with the people. And I think what is happening here, and as you were talking, and I was thinking about, we just doing drive-bys. The church is doing a drive-by, okay? And it's so commercialized, if you will, for many reasons. Now, if a politician comes to my church, they're gonna get up and speak, because I want my folk to be informed. And I just know how I was treated when I was going around here trying to, to be elected, to have a voice for those who had no voice. And I can tell you emphatically that the CME church was not as kind. Even though I've worked, I've been in the CME church all my life. But that was not the not the experience that I had. And but I didn't hold it against them, because I knew more about the pastor than it was about the church, quite frankly. And I think that's what we have to do even now, is that a lot of times we come, we come in contact with roadblocks, but you don't dismantle the church because a minister or a leader in that church would not allow you to do what you need to do. I just think that you got to look at the church as bigger than what you see. That's always been my attitude, because I love the CME church. I love the structure. I love everything about it. I love the people, but then that's leadership, because I think sometimes we get caught up in cloning. You know, he my type of leader, but he a leader, but he ain't my type.
Mm.
You know, and I think we have to get past that because, you know, I can just give you an example. When I was on the Birmingham City Council, the present mayor and I didn't always agree on anything. But we agreed to grow the city, but we didn't necessarily, our politics didn't jive. So, and in some cases, but the mayor was my speaker at my church because I don't get my politics tied up in my church. You know, my folks say, Pastor, you think you can get the mayor to speak? Sure. You know, and I worked on it, and it took us a year to get his schedule. And but nonetheless, he came, he spoke, he did an excellent job. But somebody said to me, so well, why are you inviting him to your church? I said, listen, my folk wanted him. I wouldn't dare tell them that he couldn't come here because we had an issue politically. That's small-minded. I would never, lead in that manner. Never. But that's not always the case with some pastors or so.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's twofold from kind of what I agree with what's been said, but also what I see out there in the community too is that I'll use Southern California. So in Southern California, you had a group of ministers from different denominations, African American pastors, Baptist, Church of God in Christ, and so forth. And they were really movers and shakers in the city. And so they got together and they saying, hey, we need to have this support, or we need to move in this direction. And they were able to galvanize their memberships and say, this is how we're going to support people, or these are the causes that we want to support. And it was, and they brought that to the elected officials. So elected officials saying, you know what, we want to meet these individuals, we want to meet with the mayor, we want to meet with the city council, whoever it is, or our state assembly people. And they got them together and they said, this is what we need to have happen. And so it happened internally from a group across denominations and even sometimes faiths, and said, you know, this is what we need to have. And that was a great influence, a great power structure. But now it seems like we're working in these silos and everybody has their own individual interests. And from that, our strength as a community has been weakened because we can't figure it out ourselves of what causes, what efforts, who we want to push. And so, you know, when we look at those who are running for elected office, and Bishop Ron Cunningham, for example, his brother, Dave Cunningham, who is a very influential person out here in the Los Angeles area and one of the first elected Black officials out here, you know, he was able to get all these people together and say, this is who we're going to support. This is the direction. And they get in a room and they would work it out. But when they came out, they were together and the churches were together. And so I don't see that same effort happening now. Everybody seems to be on their own pathway. Well, this works for us. This doesn't work for it. It doesn't matter. So that's I think this is what I see. So it translates to even a larger scale what's happening with the elections now. So whether you're in Mississippi or what other place, I don't know if we have that same cohesiveness as a church, as pastors, as church leaders, and even as individuals that are basically doing that. So when we look across our CMU laity, strong laity, you had like Emma Darnell, you had Mass Jackson, you had all these people from the past, you had Harold McCoy, I Carlton Paul, others in my area who were able to pull these individuals together and say, this is how we're going to move collectively and get it done. Right now, we seem to be timid or caught up in what we want to do instead of really having a strong voice.
Yeah.
And I also think part of the problem is just wanted to be politically correct.
Mm-hmm.
So don't want, candidates to come forward because don't want to offend anybody. So I think that actually plays a role too. It's just want to stay in the middle. Don't want, and they think by allowing someone to come forward to talk about their platform in some kind of way, they don't want to get caught up, if you will, in the endorsement, particularly if it offends somebody else. So I think that is an issue as well.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. If I could just add that the problem is that when you don't allow politicians to have an opportunity to speak in churches and address the congregation, you really don't know the motivations of who's running for office. And you don't know if that person is genuine and they're really interested in working for the community and doing right by its residents, or if their interests are strictly personal. And so we're seeing that now by not, the church has been a place to vet these politicians,
Right.
and we're not vetting them anymore. So now you're getting all these politicians in office that has this ulterior motive, and we're seeing it play out on the news, just
Right.
like in Oakland right now, and in so many other places in New York. So we have got to change the direction of the relationship, the partnership between political officials and churches, and kind of go back to what we know. And that is allowing these politicians to have an opportunity to state their interests, state their motivations, because otherwise we're going to have even more politicians being indicted. And they're getting in office because our congregation does not know who to support and who not to.
If I was in England, I would vote for you today. But you absolutely right. But I also want to say this: there's a new era thing is pay to play. You know,
Mhm.
and if
That's
you
a
don't
big thing.
if you don't slide it past or something, then you don't speak. You know, and I just saw that the early church, it wasn't about money. It was about being empowered. You know, it was about having a seat at the table. It was about holding people accountable. But like you say, we elect folk, we don't hold them accountable. And the other thing is that we don't know who they really are. Really
Well,
don't.
yeah, I think it's, I think Dion and Steve, you guys have an excellent point. It's before my time. But again, when you had those who were desegregating schools,
Right.
our community put forth our best students to do that.
Right.
And it was like, okay, it may not be my child, but maybe it was somebody else's child, but we put our best students forward because they knew they were going to have to endure something. They knew they could handle the weight of that was coming at them. And our churches were the vetting process.
Yeah.
Right.
Now we don't have a vetting process. And so we're getting whoever in these offices because they have not been vetted. So somehow we need to look at getting back to it. And I agree, Steve and Dion, that it's so apparent that we're not putting forth our best people because they haven't been vetted. And a lot of the stuff would have been discovered way before they got in public office, what their interests are, what they're doing, if that vetting process was there.
And then they putting folk in office don't have jobs.
Right, right.
I mean, I was on city council for 16 years, and they said, we need to make this full time. I don't need to work full time. Even though it's a full time job, but I don't want to work here. I need a retirement. I got to take care of it.
Amen to that, brother.
But these folk now, but if you look at the landscape, these young folk, they ain't got no job. Their only job is being a city council. Well, you know what that does, right?
Mhm.
And not only that, but it impositions your constituents that you work for, because like you said, then indictments come and what have you, and you say, well, you know what? They didn't have a job.
Mhm.
And for 16 years, I had 3 jobs. 3 simultaneously, and wouldn't have it no other way, and so, but that's, I went there to try to make a difference. And let me say this too, because when God places you in places where you can make that you can be influential and impactful, He expects something out of you. We get on boards and we just glad to be on the board. But I've never got on the board and glad to be on the board. I got on the board and figure out how I can impact this board to do right and to stress economic parity with respect to what was happening in and around the city. I wrote legislation. We don't have counselors or public officials who writing legislation that empowers others. when I was on the council, I wrote the historical underutilized business language that we put in every single contract now to do business with historically underutilized businesses.
Mhm.
Yeah. That was impactful. That wasn't about me. That was about us, you know. And so we don't have folks even thinking like that because they got they want to be supported by corporate America and corporate America. That's fine, you know. But when you gave me a check, I asked you, now what is this for?
Mhm.
Is this for the government or is this for control? And if
Mhm.
control, you can have your check back.
Yep.
And I've given a couple of them back, big checks,
Yes.
giving them back because you would not control me. You
Right.
know, I'm here to help, but you got to know that I represent a group of folk who are underserved. And so I don't have time to play games with people that have elected me to represent them. And
Mhm.
so you have to have that understanding. I don't know if we have that. And some of the folks that I've seen, you know, very few. And if
Mhm.
they did, they would be trying to make a difference, you know, but everything now is a Photoshop. You know, you want a photo op, op or so. And I'm all about the photo op, you know, I need that too. But you go see me working. You know, when I was on the council, I was working, trying to empower others. But that's what we need. And I would say from a church standpoint, an ecumenical standpoint, we have a responsibility to hold people accountable,
Mhm.
you know, and we do. And we're not doing that. We're not. Yeah. And Bishop, I want to hear from you.
L- let me kind of move into another area too. So and Ruben, stay on deck here. I got a very important question for you as a young adult, but I want to move to this, and I'm going to direct this initially to Daphne. So Daphne, you of course being spouse of a pastor, first lady, and also you know, the spouse of an elected official for many years. And the same with me, being, you know, the spouse of an elected official. What, I guess, what have been some things that you have learned serving in a role when you have somebody who has been so civically engaged, not only in the position, but just as a whole? So, because sometimes I think that people get afraid or intimidated by that, and they're saying, well, that's their role, they're doing that, that's not me, or I don't know if I can handle being in that role itself. So now that you kind of have served that dual role for many years, what have you, I guess, learned again? What could you pass on to others?
Well, I think one of the things that I've learned as being a minister spouse and also being the spouse of a politician is really the influence that people perceive that you have, or the power that people perceive that you have. So when we walk into a room, or my husband would walk into a room as pastor, as an elected official, you're recognized, right? You're put, if you will, upon this pedestal. So a lot of times you would see, and I think that sometimes even lends itself, if you will, to corruption, because people are starting to treat you almost like a mini god, if you will. But you have to, as a spouse, I think it's important to really be the voice of reasoning in situations like that, to not get caught up in the lights, if you will, but really to keep your spouse grounded so that you are the eyes, those second set of eyes, if you will, to help him kind of navigate the waters in the political arena. So I think my advice would be to anyone who is in a position of influence, whatever that looks like, to have someone that's in your corner who is going to really support you, but also help to be those eyes, because sometimes you can get caught up in it. And you know what people are saying about you And even there's a lot of praise that go on
Mhm.
in a position like that. And I'm quite sure you all are aware of that too. But in order for your spouse, pastor, politician to remain grounded, you need someone in your corner who's not going to always say, "You're right, you're right, you're right, you're right,"
Mhm.
because you have enough of those people in your life. And I would say it's for a season,
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
until, because it's not that they're saying you're right, you're right, you're right, you're great, just because sometimes they really think that you are. But
Mhm.
they actually, there is some type of ulterior motive. It's something that they want. They want to kind of get into the game, if you will, and
Mhm.
they can get into the game by riding that person's coattail. So, as a spouse, I think it's important to be a partner to your spouse and not just be the person that says, "You're right, you're right, you're right." But sometimes you have to tell them, "No, that's not right at all."
As
Yeah.
she would tell me, you're reading too much into that. I don't see that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's what you need. You need a Nathan. Nathan told David the truth, whether Nathan wanted to hear it or not. And I always tell folk that my wife is my Nathan because she's always told me the truth, whether I like hearing it or not.
Mhm.
And that's what you got to have. You got to strike the balance there, because you can get so caught up in and things, but you got to also have a sense of humility, and that God has put you there to make a difference in the lives of people, and so you have to be able to strike that balance, But you got to have somebody who checks you. Well, what is this? What is this new car here for?
Mhm.
How did you get that? And you don't make but $200 a month,
Mhm.
and so you got to check all of that,
Mhm.
because people come at you.
Mhm.
They do. They come in different forms and fashion, and
And
but you got to be prayed up, Bishop.
Mhm.
You got to be prayed up when you go to when things I used to, when I got to City Hall and we park underneath the City Hall, it start praying then. you know, I know something gonna go off.
yeah.
But the thing about it is, we need Christian folk.
Mhm.
We need Christian folk in government.
Mhm.
Because it's not just the balance of law, but it's the balance of your spirit.
Mhm.
It's the balance of who you are when nobody's looking. That's what you got to know and understand. And I've always thought, I asked the Lord to bless me, and then I need to honor the blessing that He's given me.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah, Daphne, you want to say one other thing? Or?
Well,
I want to add something.
go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say that I co-sign on everything you both just said, and you have to stay humble as a servant in politics, and I like Steve said, I try and stay prayed up every day, because every day you don't know what's coming at you. You don't know how the devil's going to try and come into your world that day. So you just have to stay prayed up. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity to serve my community and be impactful and make a difference. And so Shannon, and I tell him that all the time, I acknowledge him whenever we're in public spaces. He's the best part of me because he helps to keep me grounded. He prays for me. He makes sure that I'm staying humble, make sure that he's, informing me and guiding me and reminding me that I'm a Christian woman. Because, sometimes these people want to pull a non-Christian person out of you. So he helps keep me in the space of Christianity and being a humble, serving Christian woman. That's the space that I want to serve in. And I tell him all the time, when I'm no longer serving in that space, it's time for me to retire and move on to something else. So again, I'm thanking him publicly for being the best part of me.
Amen.
Thank you. Yeah. I would say this. My role is, and agreeing with everything Brad said, is that one is that, thank God that I am a Christian man, we're in a Christian household, but it's discernment of really looking what people's intentions are and what they're saying and have an understanding. Because you can just be in a public event, and a lot of times I stand back and I can see the movement of people and attitudes
Yes.
and seeing, okay, who is this person? Who are they talking to? How are they moving? What's their intention? And so that is helpful to help guide Dion in many ways on some of these things. When she's interfacing with people and I think the other part of it is, and I think that that I know that again, Daphne can understand that, is that I'm just a sounding board, and she cannot publicly go off on people. So she lets me have it. So all that, it's just like I know it's done in love, but she just got to be there and just like a boxer, stick and jab, stick and jab.
That's right.
You just kind of have to say it and say, okay, you got it out. Are you good? But it's here just listening and understanding that, and let her know that also that's her role. That's her. I'm busy enough, but again, I'm not trying to be her out there in the community. And so I have to understand and give her space of what she's doing as an elected official. And a lot of times people approach me and ask me questions, and I'm like, you know what? I don't have an opinion, or you got to ask that person. I don't know, because people will try to catch you
That's right.
Yes.
in saying something or doing something, and they will use that against her or maybe in other situations. So again, you just have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
So
Well, and one of the other things, Shannon, I would share that, if I had an issue with a politician, my wife didn't have the same issue.
mhm.
Okay. I'll give you a case in point. We had a former mayor, and I probably had a disagreement, but he's always come up and hugged my wife and acknowledging what have you. And this particular time, he didn't do it.
Mhm.
He said, "I don't know what's going on between you and him, but you've always given me a hug. Now where's my hug?"
Mhm.
And so and I welcome that, because
Mhm.
there are some politicians. If you dealing with the politician, the wife mad too. And
Yeah.
I just, we just never experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, we think differently. Okay.
Mhm.
And she's her own person. I'm my own person. And her issue is not going to be my issue, and vice
Got it.
I think, having that balance as well, because, if the wife gets old, then who strikes the balance?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have any.
So-
So it's good to have mates like that when you're serving the public that way.
But I
Good.
think it's also important to understand that it's politics and don't get twisted. But I think sometimes, and even when we see in our elections today, they're really personal. There's a lot of personal attacks go on because they can't separate the politics from the personal.
Mhm.
Or, they get into this mode of gonna win at all costs. But at the end of the day, your politics may be different, but at the end of the day, we still want the same thing.
Right.
We have a lot of times this common goals, but we are going about it a different way. So I think, but if you allow politics to creep into the personal, and then a lot of times it gets you to act outside of your character, because now you're not just dealing with the political issue where you differ, but you're starting to make personal attacks on another. So, and I have always been, even with my husband's opponent, we had a young lady, every time it was election season, she would run. But at the end of the day, when I first started practicing, we shared an office. So because I think it's important to put politics where politics should be, and not creep into the personal.
Right.
Mhm. Got it.
Right.
So let me Kareem, I want to bring you into this, back into the conversation here a little bit and kind of get your perspective on this while we have a little bit shorter on time. So I'm just kind of looking at the involvement of African Americans in the political scene over the years. And it's just like, I'm just looking at Stokely Carmichael, one of the original Freedom Bus Riders and founders of the Black Panther Party, was 21 when he got started. The Greensboro Four, the Woolworths counter protest, they were all college students. Dr. Martin Luther King was only 26 when he got involved with the Montgomery bus boycott. And Nelson Mandela was 32 years old when he became, the National Volunteer Chief of Defense of apartheid. So I guess how we shape politics and get people involved, how can we get younger African Americans more involved? I mean, are we missing something? What are we doing or not doing now, in your opinion, that maybe was happening, some years ago? Why aren't we getting more? How can we get more younger people and civically involved, and not just running for office, but just being involved and helping to shape the culture and the direction within our communities?
Yeah. Well, I think that we're not sharing the narrative of from whence we've come. And we're not having conversation with our children. And so they go up because they, I've always have had an understanding of racism and how it works because, I grew up in the 60s, growing up in the 60s and the 70s, and we still had evidence. And even I would tell you in 2000, we had evidence of that. But I have a daughter who probably never had come in contact with racism in the way that maybe you and I and others have come in contact with. But it also means that we have to share the stories, and we have to share with them how things were. My daughter was on the debate team, and so she came and she said, "Dad, I don't believe in affirmative action. She said, I don't need affirmative action." I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "But you understand that affirmative action, when you were granted and had an opportunity as a result of affirmative action, you had to perform at a greater level, a higher level than your counterparts." I said, "So affirmative action that didn't degrade one, ability. It just gave them access that they wouldn't have had otherwise." Don't come here and tell me you don't believe in affirmative action. I said, because Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, none of those persons would have ever been where they are now. If they hadn't had, affirmative action. So affirmative action did a lot to empower us and give us opportunities that we never would have had.
So let me go back. Let me ask Caribbean what his thoughts are on this, being a young adult.
I want to piggyback off Stephen there. Yeah, I think that, when you look at it, I think it's just outside of the church as well, like in schools. Growing up, during my time in schools, we used to pray in the morning. They've taken, the church out of school and changed the focus of certain things. And I think that in our generation, our focus isn't on it's not as popular in the political, not even just being elected, but starting change. Our views and I'm trying to think of the word. I'm sorry.
Good.
Our influence is not geared towards that realm, and I think a lot of people, like you said, that there's a disconnect. Back in the day, there was a certain structure when a foundation in children as they were raised. Like the Bible says, train up a child in the way they should go, and I don't see that nowadays as much. There are certain few, and there are reaching to those communities, but it just has to be, has to be in you to do it. And I just think that it's kind of not, not to be negative, but it's like a dying breed of individuals who are willing to do. You can say a lot of things, you can try to get a message across, but it can go in one ear and out the other if there's no action behind it. And I think that's another thing, that we're more visual learners nowadays. We have to see it versus hearing it. You know, these different things, like even on the ballot, there's different things that are on the ballot. You know, it could say one thing, but then it means another. We're not really seeing how it can be translated until it's too late.
So do you see that? Let me just kind of follow with that a little bit. So your friends that you have, friends or relatives, those who are, around your same age, are they registered to vote, or do they have an interest in even voting? I mean, are they just saying, it's hopeless? Are they saying that it won't make a difference? But are they actually registered to vote,
I
and
would
are they
say,
voting?
and it's pretty sad. I say more so are not, registered to vote or think there's an importance to voting. And I think that it has a lot to do with how the media is consumed, and certain things. And I've noticed, on certain social media platforms, there are different, ways the messages are being brought out. Even on television, there's different ways the messages are brought out. And I think that a lot of my generation it has a very nonchalant kind of demeanor when it comes to politics. Like, oh, my vote doesn't matter. They don't win by just one vote. But if you have tens of thousands of people with that same mindset, that can really sway a vote, in those different areas. So I think, and then also we've become very we're not able to agree to disagree. We may not, have the same stance on a subject, so we just try to just cancel out, like, oh well, let's not talk about it. Let's talk about something else. So it's kind of hard to have those uncomfortable conversations within our generation, because it comes back to accountability. Accountability is not as prevalent, and not is very scarce. We're not taking accountability to get our brothers and sisters out and out to vote, or out the importance of the different things, and the consumption of different knowledge we keep to ourselves. That's another thing too. We don't try to spread what we know. We always they think that, oh, they already know about that. I don't have to tell them again. But if you continue to tell them, you may tell them something they may not know already. And so that's another thing I think is a part of the issue.
Okay.
Excellent comments.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely.
I
So,
do want to just add in too, and I think that your comments are excellent, Kareem. One thing that I have seen is that bringing politics back to the church in this conversation is you see less and less children in the church. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And you see less and less emphasis on the activities of children in the church. And I think we're going in the wrong direction. They need to be front and center. There's no life in the church if you don't have kids in the church actively engaged and participating. And it really hurts my heart when I go to a lot of the churches now. Children are not the focus. And that's another challenge. And that goes back to what Kareem was saying, is that that's something that happens at an early age. And if we don't start making them the focus of what's happening in our church and bringing them back in, then they're going to continue to be on the outside looking in. And God help the direction of this church if it continues like this.
Yes.
Excellent.
yeah,
Also, I think it's important, and we have tried to stress this in our household, to stress civil engagement even as a young child. There is an expectation that you are involved, where it's on being involved in the church on some level, being involved at your school. But when you really don't stress civil engagement, people are generally checked out about what's going on around them, and even we have a biological daughter, and we have another daughter, a bonus child that we have, and even she wrote, and she's really a wonderful writer, but in something that she had to do an essay on, and she talked about And a lot of times you don't even know what influence you're really having until you kind of, it shows up. But in this case, what she wrote about when she lived, you know, prior to her coming to live with us, those expectations were not there. But when she came to live with us, those expectations were there. You know, you are expected to get involved. And as a matter of fact, she actually has one of the highest community service credit hours of her school, not just of her class, of her school, because I believe in you have to get involved in your community. So it starts young. But if you have children who are not engaged on some level, they grow up not being engaged. But if you start them at an early age, it just gets to be the norm for them. And that same daughter in 11th grade, she was elected the SGA president because it's important that you get them involved. You let them understand the importance of community. You make sure that you stress the importance of voting. Even when we had our oldest daughter, when she went off to college, even those times that she couldn't make it back to vote, we made sure she had an absentee ballot. Because I think as parents, we have a responsibility to push that civil engagement. We have the responsibility to stress the importance of voting and not just letting it be something that's just kind of happen. So you have to be, just like we're intentional about our kids playing sports, about our kids doing, you know, other things in life, we also have to be intentional about them being engaged civilly.
Got it. Appreciate it. Well, we're just about here at our time, and I'll before we close out, I'll just kind of respond to that, and we'll finish, and I'll turn it back over to Bishop Thomas. One thing I think that that young engagement of the kids not there is that what I'm concerned about is that the importance of the example of seeing voting. And so now we have so much attention on absentee ballots that people don't understand what that means. So they see you just checking off a box and putting something in the mail. I know my house was a little bit different because my parents were very involved, but my father took my sister and I to the polls every time we voted so he could show us voting and the importance of voting and walk into that and understanding that. And so I think that if everything becomes so convenient and easy, they don't understand the importance of basic exercising that right. It's almost like ordering something on Amazon. Yeah. And so now the push is absentee ballots, where the push for, especially for younger generation, those first-time voters should be walking to the polls and making that an exercise so they can see what this is all about. So I think that we haven't seen the impacts of that. I know that we're focusing on absentee ballots nationwide, but I think that in a generation, it's going to impact it. And it could be an impact in the negative piece because people will just be checking off of a vote and don't know what that really means and exercising that. So just kind of my own personal observation. So let me just say this, it's been a wonderful discussion. There's been a number of comments on this itself. And I appreciate all of you who taken this time on a Sunday afternoon to really, have this conversation, a dialogue, open dialogue about politics, your involvement, the importance of it, the church's role in it, and kind of really giving different perspectives on this. And I appreciate Bishop Marvin Thomas and Bishop Charlie Haynes and Dr. Teresa Duhart, who and her team who assist each and every time of putting this together. It's one I wanted, everybody kind of has their own approach. So I appreciate Bishop Thomas kind of giving me the leeway to kind of say, what do you want to do? For me, it's a matter of just having a personal conversation and not having something so formal, but really having involved. So again, I want to thank Reverend Steve Hoyt and Daphne Hoyt, Caribbean Walmart, from the 6th Episcopal District, and of course my lovely wife Dion Fogg for her participation in all of this. And I hope for those of you who are listening that it also was something that was informative. You learned from it, and And we need to do more of this, and we will continue to do more of this, of how we can get laity involved of all ages involved in this. And one of the things that we're working on right now, we did this at this, now we've done, Bishop, is at the Unity Summit, we passed out information to identify all of our elected officials who are CMEs across our connection. We need to know who those individuals are. So whether you hold, if you're a mayor, city council, school board, whatever those positions are within your communities, please reach out to me at the Department of Department of Lay Ministries, so we can identify those individuals and we can start really learning from that. There's much we can do with that, but we need to identify who those individuals are. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and Bishop, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, let me thank you, Dr. Falk, and let me thank this wonderful panelist for a stimulating and informative and inspiring conversation tonight. And one of the things I want to say, one of the things we did at our spring gathering here in the First Episcopal District is that we intentionally celebrated all of the elected officials, past and present at the First Episcopal District, and it was a wonderful and in a very tangible way. And let me just say, one of the things that we're seeing now as it relates to politicians and churches is that they're really beginning, in some instances I've seen here in Memphis especially, is that they are not necessarily coming to churches, but they're galvanizing, they're holding group sessions or with ministers in different places. But one of the things that we have to be intentional about is making sure that when they have these gatherings of clergy with politicians, that the CME Church is not absent.
That's right.
And so that's one of the things that we're working on here in the First Episcopal District, is making sure that that we are not absent from the table, and that if there are invitations going out from politicians for the gathering of faith leaders, we expect that we are a part of the invited list, and that we not only be invited, but we show up as well. So again, let me thank you for a wonderful panel tonight, and and it's been a rich conversation. And I hope that it inspires others to become actively involved, engaged, and really just like our young people inspire to be athletes, why can't they inspire to be politicians? Persons who serve their communities. And so let me just remind you to check www.vote.org to check your status and to check where you vote, and then to check what's on the ballot. And remember, we're just not voting for a president, we're voting all the way down the ballot. Yes. And so really take an opportunity to know what's on the ballot in your county before you show up for election day. Vote early, and I'm like Dr. Falk. I mean, if you have to do a mail-in, that's fine, but do a walk-in somewhere, whether it's on election day or before election day. Invite a cousin or a friend or a brother into our senior parents. I say to you, your children, tell them they owe you one. They owe you one, and what you want is for them to vote. They owe you one for what you did for them, and so. We look forward next week. We have a wonderful panel again. We got 2 more of these, but as we say at Trinity CME Church here in Memphis, I got a feeling everything is going to be all right. And then because I'm confident, I'm going to say it's all right already. So thank you for a wonderful night and great panelists. Always good to see you. Reverend Hood and Sister Falk and our young adult. And so God bless you and the CME Church. We got to show up and show out.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, appreciate it, and pray for my wife as she's up for
and all of those who joined us tonight. See you next week. God bless. Have a good night.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful.
You all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stop the